In today's world, people feel lost in a sea of ideas. Which ones should we accept? Stay tuned because you're listening to Veracity Hill, striving for truth on faith, politics, and society. Here is your host, Kurt Jarris.
Well, a good day to you, and thanks for joining us here on another episode of Veracity Hill, where we are striving for truth on faith, politics, and society. So nice to be with you here yet again, week after week on Veracity Hill. It's the show where you can come to learn more and think critically about the Christian worldview and issues all pertaining to that. As Christians, how are we to look at a number of issues? And sometimes we are able to just scratch the surface on some issues. Sometimes we go just a little bit deeper. But if you want to go deeper on, say, some of the best Christian thinkers of history, I want to encourage you to check out Ken Sample's new book, Classic Christian Thinkers. You know, many of us pick up Christian theology and history in a piecemeal way, making it difficult to understand its significance. In his new book, Classic Christian Thinkers, philosopher and theologian Kenneth Samples offers a masterful summary of the lives of Christianity's greatest defenders. The history of these 9 timeless truth seekers overflows from the pages of the Bible into history itself. Take a step toward a richer faith by visiting reasons.org/veracity and order your copy of Classic Christian Thinkers today. Well, interestingly enough, on today's episode, we are looking at missions in the Czech Republic. And of course, many of the classic Christian thinkers of Christian history were interested in missions. Some of them were missionaries themselves. And so it's missions is an important part to play in the Christian worldview, whether we go off to a new culture, a new people, a totally different language that we have to learn, or whether we are missionaries in our everyday life. That's what God calls us to do and to be. And what that looks like for people differs. But we have a special in-studio guest today who is a missionary to the Czech Republic. And I look forward to learning more about his journey. He is Brad Kaspar. Brad, thanks for joining us on our program today.
Kurt, thanks for having me.
All right, so before we learn more about the Czech Republic and your interest in moving there, and I'm even curious to learn, how you identify, if that's your home. You've made it your home. You've raised a family there. But first, let's start about where are you originally from? I think there's something about Wheaton College, maybe, or the Wheaton area. So I'd love to learn more about your background and your history.
Sure. I grew up on the south side of Chicago and went to Wheaton College with the plan to study mechanical engineering. Not a typical choice at Wheaton, but nevertheless, that's what I chose. And it's a long story, but basically, during my time at Wheaton, I realized how much I enjoy working with youth. And so part of that was being at Honey Rock Camp through Wheaton College.
Ah, okay.
And then after Honey Rock, I came back, got involved in the youth program at Faith Covenant Church. And
it's a very good church, I hear.
Oh, absolutely. I loved it. That's where I went. And then in the process, heard about the Czech Republic and Josiah Venture doing these English camps through a friend at Wheaton College. And so went there for one summer as an intern. And after that one summer, I just couldn't stop thinking about what I experienced. So I went back a second time, then a third summer, stayed there for a fall, and eventually moved there full-time as a missionary.
Wow, okay, so let me try to get some of the dates here. So how long ago was it that you were at Wheaton College?
So I was at Wheaton from 98 to 02 or 03. I did the 5-year program, and I crammed it into 6 years. So
crammed it, not extended. You crammed it into 6, okay?
Yeah, I did internships with Josiah Venture. I did internships with engineering, and after the internships, really saw my heart was in youth work. So I finished the engineering degree in 04, and then was raising support, and then moved to the Czech Republic in 2005.
Okay, all right. Now tell me about these English camps. When I think of an English camp, I think of like, is it like a youth camp where kids come to learn English type of thing?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
In the Czech Republic and pretty much all over Europe, if anybody knows English, they're gonna get a better job, better position, better pay, and there's a big push for learning English. Lots of students just want to know what's going on in the movies and music, YouTube, and they're just naturally drawn towards English now. So it's a wide open door, and the funny thing is, parents will send their kids to camp, and they know these are Christian camps, and so
but they want them to learn English.
Yeah, they tell their kids, don't get brainwashed, don't become a Christian, just learn as much English as you can.
Yeah.
And so these camps are done with Josiah Venture,
okay, and
they're all about partnering churches in the States with churches in Czech, and everything they do, they want to be based in the local church. So we focus on youth work in Josiah Venture because the name is based off of King Josiah in the Bible, and he came to power when he was 8 years old. When he was 16, he started following God,
implemented the reforms,
and in his 20s he turned the whole country back to following God. And we're praying for young Josiahs to be raised up in Central and Eastern Europe, and that they would have the same impact on their countries.
Let me ask you about English here. I once went on a tour in Salzburg, and in Austria there folks speak German, but our tour guide sounded like she was from California. Perfect, flawless English, and it had a Californian accent, and I sort of picked up on this because I went to school out in California from university, and so I asked her if she was from California, and she said, no, I'm from here. I'm a local. And I said, how do you have a perfect Californian accent? She said, you know what she said? I watch a lot of American television and movies. I was blown away. She was a native, and she could speak German, and have a thick German accent, and then put on an American accent. And so I thought that was fascinating. So you mentioned here, as folks might be hearing a fire truck go by here, as is so common here on Veracity Hill. You mentioned that some of the Czech youth are interested in being able to understand even YouTube. So how many of them have sort of a natural, like this German tour guide I had, how many of them come with sort of a basic understanding, or how many of them struggle with it? What would you say is your perception?
I'd say most Czechs have some working knowledge of English, but it's all in their head, and they need
need to practice it.
The best thing is they know what they should say in theory, but they just don't have the practice. And they don't have the practice of hearing a native speaker speaking, and at camp they're forced to interact with Americans the whole week.
Yeah.
They have meals together, they play sports, do all kinds of things, and I've heard English teachers in their schools comment over and over when the kids come back from a summer and from camp, they'll say, my students are so much better in their English now. And the biggest thing is their confidence increases. So they're not afraid to speak, and then once that barrier is overcome, then they just really move forward.
So with Josiah Venture, you have Americans going over there. So like you said, an internship or like a short-term mission trip or something like that. Are the camps like a week long? And obviously, these Americans, they wouldn't have to know any Czech, and so it's sort of an immersion experience for the locals.
Right. It's, in my opinion, it's one of the best mission trips possible for American churches, because it's all based on relational evangelism, and Americans are very good at being friendly and really good at just speaking English.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even have to be grammatically correct.
It's just conversational English.
It's conversational.
Yeah.
So kids will ask me questions. They'll ask some grammar question, and I'll say, I don't know the answer to that. I just know it sounds right. So it's the perfect fit, because these Americans can come over. They just love on the students, get to know them, speak English, and through the relationships, kids improve their English big time, but then they become pretty interested to know more about the faith these Americans have, and why they would come to Czech for a week at camp.
Right.
And, a lot of these Americans will take their vacation days so that they can be there, and it really gets the Czechs thinking.
Now, for you decided, hey, I want to go live over there. I want to make that my home. What was the language barrier like for you? So you probably, I assume, speak Czech fluently now. I mean, how long have you been there? 05, so you've been there 14 years?
Yeah, I've been there 14 years, and the Czech language, I've heard it said that it's one of the hardest languages for English speakers to learn, and I would definitely agree with that. I'd say the first 2 years, Josiah Venture said, we really want you to focus on learning the language. So I was helping out with youth groups, meeting with youth leaders a little bit, but most of the time I was just learning the language, and that was really important for being able to stay there long term. Just getting a handle on the language, and now most everything I do is in Czech, in the Czech language.
So how long did it take you to really become fluent?
I feel like I'm still making big mistakes
14 years
and
later.
still learning different things, but I'd say after 3 years it was starting to become conversational.
Yeah.
But even still, when sometimes I'll preach at church, someone will come up afterwards and say, you have a really simple way of expressing yourself, and we can remember it, but it's also kind of a nice way of saying your Czech is pretty simple too.
Yeah. Wow, interesting. Okay, so tell me about what you do over there, right? So you just mentioned that you preach, so you're involved with a local church. Youth work is important to you as well. So do you have are you a pastor? What's your full-time job? Sometimes folks are bivocational. What's your situation over there?
Well, Josiah Venture is all about working with local churches, and so when we go over as missionaries, they sometimes have specific roles that missionaries will take, like camp coordinator for a country, maybe helping with different training events. And in my situation, they had me leading camps in the summer, but then the rest of the year they said, okay, we want you to be focused in a local ministry and just trying to create some kind of ministry that could be a model and maybe an inspiration for other youth groups. So basically I was doing the camps in the summer, and then after 2 years I met my wife, and she's Czech, and we were dating, we got married, and then a church planter approached us and asked if we would move to his town and help them start a youth program in their church. So that's what we decided to do, and we've been in that town for about 10 years now. So now the youth group is up and going. We've passed the leadership on to other guys, and we still help with the youth group, but now in the last year I've really started meeting with different youth workers in the region and discipling them, meeting with them, coaching them, listening to them, and that's something that Josiah Venture is really starting to do on a larger scale as well. Really trying to focus on these youth leaders in the different cities and supporting them, and then providing resources, providing English camp or other tools that would help their church grow, but really trying to help these youth leaders be disciples of Christ.
I know a little later on I want to get to talking about the state of Christianity in the Czech Republic and all that, and the importance of evangelism. But I want to ask you, so there are a number of different sending organizations. You've mentioned Josiah Venture here quite a bit. So why did you decide to go through Josiah Venture?
Josiah Venture was the group I went through as an intern, and just through getting to know all these missionaries there, I was really impressed with the character and especially the vision. And Josiah Venture's vision is a movement of God among the youth of Central and Eastern Europe that finds its home in the local church and transforms society.
Yeah.
So when I saw that in action in these summer camps, I was saying, this is something I want to be a part of. This is much bigger than myself, and it's very focused on raising up nationals and not just doing something that's dependent on me and other Americans.
Mm-hmm. So you said you met your now wife over there. So how long was that from when you learned? I mean, I could imagine if it happened early on, there would be a language barrier of sorts. Was that in that stage?
No, thankfully she speaks English really well.
Okay.
And just by God's grace and timing, I actually met her when I moved there full time, and we were friends for 2 years before I realized I wanted to marry her.
Yeah.
And so during those 2 years, I really got to learn the language and get more used to the Czech culture.
Yep.
Instead of if we had started dating right off the bat, that would have been a lot more difficult.
Sure.
Just with learning the language and trying to learn the culture and everything. So it's so good that just God had his timing in it all. And then when we did start dating, we were speaking English together. I tried to speak Czech with her, but I would just get too frustrated with myself. And our relationship is in English, but our kids are bilingual, so she speaks Czech at home, I speak English at home.
And you know enough Czech that she can't be like making jokes about you with the kids, you know.
Oh, she wouldn't do that anyway. Yeah, but if her parents are over, they all speak Czech, so we all speak Czech together. And right now when we're in the States, when we're visiting people, we'll all speak English together. So yeah, it's a neat family dynamic.
So let me ask you this. I have Czech ancestry, Czech heritage, and my last name, Jiris, is Czech. My family hail from the town of Pilsen, where they make the beer. And so my wife and I had a chance to visit there in Pilsen many years ago now. But my last name, so in English we say Jiris. How would people there say my last name?
In Czech, your last name would be Jaroš.
Jaroš.
Jaroš, and you'd have a kind of a Nike symbol on the S.
Okay, a swoosh.
Yeah, swoosh. So Jaroš, and your wife would be Jarošova. So
Jarošova.
Yeah, so add an OVA to the women's last names.
And that's the case for men and women.
Yeah, men have Jaroš, or whatever the last name is, and then the women have OVA to the end.
OVA. So if it's Smith, a Smith Ova.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and oddly enough, my last name Kaspar, we think it used to be Kasparovich, coming from Lithuania.
Okay.
But then in America they shortened it to Kaspar, and in Czech Kaspar is a typical Czech name, so it should be actually Kaspar with the swoosh over the S. And my wife gets a lot of strange looks when she goes into the offices because she's not Kasparova and she's not Kasparova, she's just Kaspar. Because we knew it'd be simpler coming to the US.
Yeah.
And but it's an open door for her to share why she's got a last name like that and what we're doing in Czech.
Yeah. Neat. Well, why don't we take a short break here? But when we come back, I want to ask you more about the state of Christianity, or even lack thereof, in the Czech Republic. Fascinating, even just history there. You think, former Soviet Union territory. And also then the importance of evangelism and methods for reaching Czech people. I'd be interested to learn that. So yes, stick with us through this short break from our sponsors.
You're listening to Veracity Hill, striving for truth on faith, politics, and society.
Evangelical Christians are talking about hell. What if we believe what we believe because we've always believed it? What if the gospel is really a matter of life and death? We want you to open your mind, open your Bible, and rethink hell. At rethinkinghell.com, evangelicals look at what the Bible says about hell, putting conventional and controversial views to the test.
Let's say there's this Christian apologist. You love their message, but have trouble finding their videos, their articles, or social media posts. How do you stay connected to them? We're on it. Defenders Media uses the tools of the digital age to create content for your favorite apologists. We give them more screen time, more digital soapboxes, and more presence to deliver more of the content that you love. That's what we do.
I know that social media is important to those of you who follow my work. Many respond to my videos and posts on Facebook and Twitter, but it becomes impossible after a while to keep up with it all and to continue with research. That's why I'm thrilled that we have found a solution, Defenders Media.
Whether it's a website, whether it's printed material, whether it's a question on graphics, I cannot do what I do and reach my audience without the help of Defenders Media. They have been integral in helping me to reach my audience.
Defenders Media ensures consistent content reaches your hand from today's leading apologists and apologetic ministries, like Mike Licona, Apologetics 315, the Veracity Hill Podcast with Kurt Jarris, and more.
To learn more, text the word Defenders to 555-888, and we'll send you a free PDF of the top 5 ways to share the gospel online. Thanks for sticking with us through that short break from our sponsors. If you want to learn how you can become a sponsor, you can go to our website, veracityhill.com, and click on that Patron tab. You can see the different sponsorship levels. We'd love to help you advertise your organization, your business, or even your ministry. I'd love to get the word out about what you are doing. On today's episode, we're talking about missions in the Czech Republic, and we're joined by a missionary to there. His name is Brad Kaspar, and he now considers the Czech Republic his home. He's been there for 14 years and raising a family there. Very much involved with the youth work there. Brad, before we go any further in our discussion here, we do a segment on the show called Rapid Questions, where we ask you just some short, very unrelated questions about the topic today, so we can get to know you a little bit better. And so it's just 60 seconds, and should be a lot of fun. So if you are ready, I will get the game clock going.
Okay.
All right, here we go. What's your clothing store of choice?
Oh boy, secondhand.
Okay, what school did you go to?
Morgan Park Academy and Wheaton College.
What's your spouse's favorite holiday?
Ooh, I don't have her with me, so I'll guess and say Christmas.
Okay, what's your favorite movie?
Shawshank Redemption.
Do you drink Dr. Pepper?
Nope.
Sorry to hear that. Have you ever driven on the other side of the road?
Not intentionally.
What is your inner milkshake flavor?
Probably mint chocolate chip.
Okay, do you like to dance?
If nobody's watching.
When's the last time you swam in a pool?
Oh, probably about 2 weeks ago.
Okay, pick a fictional character that you'd like to meet.
Somebody from Lord of the Rings.
Somebody. Can you think of one character?
Oh, maybe Sam.
Sam, yes. Oh, the faithful disciple. He is one that carries the burden of his friends. I definitely like Samwise. He's underrated in my book. All right. I was curious. I asked you the question about spouse's favorite holiday, but I'm curious, in the Czech Republic, what are some national holidays that maybe Americans, aren't aware of?
Well, probably the most interesting holiday is Easter, and the reason for that is there's this long-standing tradition that Czechs hold to, and they believe that on Easter Monday, the men should go and visit the women and whip them with these willow-braided sticks. And the idea is the willow branches have to be freshly cut, and when you whip the women with them, or you hit them,
is this lightly or is it firmly?
Those that take it seriously hit the girls pretty hard. And the idea is there's life in those branches, and so if you want these women to be fertile in the following year, you hit them with these branches. And then as you hit them, you recite a poem, and then they give you eggs and chocolate and
the
money.
Women give you eggs and chocolate.
Yeah.
So you basically beat them, and then they give you goods.
Yes, exactly.
What is the origin of this tradition?
It goes back a long time, and I don't know exactly where it came from, but my wife doesn't like it because she had a brother and lots of cousins, and they're all guys, and she's the only girl, so she would be pretty bruised on Easter Monday.
Interesting tradition there. Now, this serves as a good segue as well. So Easter is a holiday that's recognized in the Czech Republic, and I'm curious to now get into and explore the Christian worldview of religion in the Czech Republic. It's not known for being a religious state, so maybe you can give me a little bit of history or background of the state of Christianity in the Czech Republic.
Yeah. Well, interestingly enough, the Czech Republic has a long history of Christian people that did pretty significant things, but most Czechs don't know about it today.
Jan Hus is the first that comes to mind.
Yes, yeah. So Jan Hus, basically, he did what Martin Luther did 100 years before Martin.
Yeah.
And people were not ready to hear what he said, and he didn't have the support Martin Luther had, so he got burned at the stake. And his followers were called the Hussites, and they continued to stand for his cause, and they basically started a war with the Catholic Church, or the Catholic Church started it with them, and it became the 30 Years' War.
Okay.
And at the end of that war, the Catholics won, and it became basically illegal to not be a Catholic. If you're a Protestant, you'd be imprisoned or fined or maybe even killed. And that continued for a long time, and I think that can be one reason Czechs today are very against organized religion, because they've seen what the church can do. And so that's one thing that comes to mind. And then there's so many stories, but if you've heard of Zinzendorf and the Moravian Brothers, if you trace that whole movement, it actually started with a revival in a village in the Czech Republic, and the man that led that was immediately persecuted, and they left Czech and went to Zinzendorf seeking asylum, and he gave it to them, and then some incredible things happened when they were with Zinzendorf. One of them was this 100-year-long prayer movement that was 24 hours a day for 100 years, and they also sent out hundreds of missionaries all over the world, and some of those missionaries, these are the Moravian Brothers, they met John Wesley, and Wesley records this in his diaries and says that they played a large role in his conversion, and then he went to the States and the Great Awakening came about. So you can even trace the Great Awakening in America back to the Czech Republic, and then today the Czech Republic is the most atheistic country in the world. They're tied with Estonia as far as I know. So long history of Christianity, but today you wouldn't know that.
Yeah. And again, I'm just going off of my education here. I take it that the Soviet Union, sort of running the show there for a long time, was responsible for the decline in religion.
The Soviet Union definitely made it much more difficult to be a Christian. So the church that was already struggling was suppressed even more. And so today, people that are probably 10, 20 years older than me, so in their 50s and older, they grew up in that thinking of communism, and they were taught that God doesn't exist. And so it's really hard to have any kind of conversation about God with the older generations. I've tried at different times with teachers in the schools, and one teacher said, I just don't have a category for this in my mind, and I'm not able to talk about it. And interestingly enough, the youth are very open. Communism ended in 1989, so these young people, they don't know what communism was like. They don't know what it was like to not have enough, and so their outlook is very different, and at the same time they're very open to everything. So whether it be Christianity or New Age or anything else that comes their way, they're open to it, and then they'll just pick and choose what fits them well and add that to their world outlook.
Interesting. On our program here, we talk about a variety of issues, including political ones, and so I'm always interested to learn about the experience of people that have lived in communist countries and have come out of that, or someone like yourself who is just immersed in a post-communist country, because here in America we've had it so good for so long, and yet people are flirting with communist policies, and I'd argue it actually happens on both sides of the political aisle, and people have trouble recognizing it because of partisan politics that plays out. So I'm always grateful to hear of that. But as you say, now them coming out, they sort of can pick and choose things and what to believe. Now it's sort of, you go from a closed market, so to speak, of ideas to a vastly open market. So it's a free-for-all almost. Yeah. And the goal here is to help Christianity to be the winsome one in the marketplace of ideas. So what are ways that you're able to reach people with the gospel? There are different methods of evangelism. You got open air preaching, you've got Christian camps, you've got friendship evangelism. What are, in your experience, what are some of the more effective ways of reaching folks with the gospel?
Well, in these camps that we do, we've found they can be some of the best ways to share the gospel, because Czechs have an idea in their minds of what Christians are like, and usually they picture very old women that are praying in these giant cathedrals, and there's no connection to real life, and there's no young people in the church. So for them to meet Christians at these camps, and then they get to hear their personal stories and realize this is something that is very current and influences every aspect of these people's lives, and they seem pretty normal, and actually they seem like they have something that I want. And so spending a whole week with Christians really can change students' perspectives on things, as opposed to street evangelism or just accosting someone and saying you need the gospel, you need Jesus, and they're just walls that have been built over time that prevent that from being very effective in my experience.
Yeah, so even when folks are like open air preaching, I know a lot of Americans, those that do it, they think that it will be effective. Maybe they'll just think the Holy Spirit will open people's minds, which could happen. But at the same time, when I think here of the, you said you were talking with a professor or an academic, he said he didn't have that category. And so sometimes open air preaching just falls on deaf ears because you're just not even reaching the culture where they're at. And Jesus calls us to be an effective witness, right? To be salt. Paul says, I become all things to all men that I might, save some. So we need to have our preaching even be effective. So for the open air preacher, to say be preaching fire and brimstone. And I say this because here in America, we need to recognize the ever-changing culture, right? Fire and brimstone doesn't work on a culture that just upholds and praises relativism. In the same way, if you've got folks without even the category of God, then that's going to take certain types of conversations over a long time for them to open up to the idea of God.
Yeah.
Even.
Yeah, I've found that I have opened doors in talking with people, just by asking them what they believe or what their viewpoint on life is, and often it helps when there's some kind of trust, some kind of friendship or inroads with them. If it's a complete stranger, it can happen, but just not being ashamed, not being scared to go deeper with people you get to know. I found with our kids getting older, we've been able to get to know the parents of other classmates from our kids, and so they've been very open to talking and even discussing Christianity, and the same is true just talking with people that come for English classes in our city, and then they get to know our church, which does these English programs.
Yeah.
And they're very open to discussing things as well. But in the Czech Republic especially, you've got to build a certain level of trust with people before they start to open up. And I'd say with the older generation, that's especially true. And with the younger generation, it's more when they get to see your life on display, if it's at English camp or even when they're coming to youth group and just get to know you, that can play a big role.
My wife and I lived in England for a year, and I became aware of a program called the Alpha Course. Have you heard of it?
Yeah, they use it in the Czech Republic too.
I was going to ask, so is there a course or curriculum like that sort of, for some it's a reintroduction of Christianity. Many in the UK, they might have been raised as a kid in the church, but then they, left it. But for others, it's it's an introduction to Christianity. So they use the Alpha Course then, probably the Czech version.
Yeah. It's been translated into Czech, and some churches use it, and they found it to be very effective. And really, it works well with people that are looking for something. When they've done different polls and surveys in the schools in the Czech Republic and Slovakia, they found that 20% of students, I believe that was the number, they said that they were interested in knowing more about Jesus as a person if they just had someone to talk to. But the problem is, in the Czech Republic, the statistics say that 0.3% of the nation is evangelical believers, and so that's 1 in 300 people. So the chances of you meeting a Christian are pretty low, and then you may meet a Christian, but if you even know that they're a Christian, that sometimes you don't even know that. So there are people that are really searching, but it's just a matter of somehow getting
the answers to them.
Yeah.
Wow. So that is a big challenge. I'm sure word of mouth and work like that. What's the role of the internet play there?
There are some different projects being done in Czech with the internet, and from what I hear, people are posing questions and chatting with people through these sites, and yeah, I think that definitely is one way to do it. I know missionaries with Josiah Venture in other countries are trying to figure out how to use social media in an effective way to just get the gospel into students' social media lives. And I think these websites in Czech are effective if someone is searching, but there are so many other ways that we have to figure out to get into these forums and into the things that are already taking place, and getting people aware of what Christianity is about.
If some of our listeners and viewers wanted to reach out and learn more, what's a good way they can learn more about your work, or a way to contact you?
Probably the best would be josiahventure.com.
Okay.
And then you can just search under the countries for Czech Republic, and we're there.
Yeah.
I'd say that's probably the best way.
Great. And what's something we can pray for you and your family for?
I would say just that we would continue to be bold in sharing the gospel with people around us. It's easy to fall into a routine and just be waiting for that perfect moment, and that usually doesn't come. So just that we would be bold in going deep and not worrying about what people's reaction may be, but just being open about what we believe and encouraging others around us to do the same.
Awesome. Brad, thank you for joining us on our program today, learning just more about you as a person, but then also the state of Christianity in the Czech Republic. It's always nice to hear about what's happening on the mission field, far and near as well. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
You bet.
Appreciate it.
Well, that does it for our show today. I'm grateful for the continued support of our patrons. Those are folks that just chip in a few bucks each month. If you want to learn how you can become a patron, you can go to our website, veracityhill.com. I'm also grateful for the partnerships that we have with our sponsors. They are Defenders Media, Consult Kevin, The Sky Floor, Rethinking Hell, Illinois Family Institute, Fox Restoration, and Reasons to Believe. I want to thank our technical producer, Chris, for all the fine work that he does. And to our guest today, Brad Kaspar. If you want to learn more about the type of work that he does, you can go to josiahventure.com. And last but certainly not least, I want to thank you for listening in and for striving for truth on faith, politics, and society.
You've been listening to Veracity Hill, striving for truth on faith, politics, and society. This is a listener-supported program. For more resources, including past shows, visit veracityhill.com.